Hello and welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button. Your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today I'm continuing on in my series, When God Kills, but because it's Holy Week, I figured we should finally at last look at the time that God kills his own kid. And that is the crucifixion. The crucifixion is well chronicled, I suppose, in the various Gospels. In fact, all the Gospels, including Mark, who doesn't have really a resurrection account, does include a crucifixion account. And I guess the theme that's really interesting to me in the whole crucifixion is actually brought out by Isaiah 53:10, where the Bible says that he was pleased to crush him, pleased to crush his son. And this idea in Christian theology, of course, Isaiah 53:10 is argued by Christians that this is a fulfillment, is fulfilled in Jesus being crucified. That when you look at Isaiah 53, it's a picture of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Though I think that's very problematic, and I think it's more about the nation of Israel itself and not Jesus personally. But that's if you're looking at it very hermeneutically and trying not to read into the text, that's actually the conclusion you come up with. But in Christian theology and Christian biblical study, the attitude, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is in a lot of biblical studies, you have certain themes that guide the understanding and interpretation of later events. And in this case, Isaiah 53 often guides Christians' understanding of the crucifixion event, that he's, by his stripes we are healed, and all these other events, but also the idea that one of them presents, 53:10, Isaiah 53:10 presents, which is, and God was pleased to crush him. Now, this creates a very interesting attitude in God as he's sacrificing his son. See, because one of the notions in this series of When God Kills is we're trying to demonstrate that the God of the Bible is actually quite barbaric. Okay, that his attitude about death and human suffering is almost indifferent. Okay, to him, it's almost like, well, yeah, of course, humans should be sacrificed. It's like there's no remorse about it for God in many cases. God sends evildoers right in front of his throne and then kills them again by throwing them into hell or annihilating them, depending on your theological persuasion. And so we have a God who seems to be very callous at times towards human life, except his own people. But then even with his own people, he kills them too. And so we get to the idea, though, of God killing his own child, okay? We've got to remember that the Christian theology is that this virgin woman is implanted with God's, whatever seed, we'll just put it that way. And somehow this child becomes the Son of God and thus avoids the whole sin trap. Although it could be argued some of the events that Jesus is portrayed in, where he could actually be violating the law of God, would cause him to be a sinner, but we'll leave that for another time. But right now we have this idea of this perfect being sacrificed on a cross in order to appease God, although the guy on the cross is also God. But once again, that's the ridiculousness of it. So we have this attitude, though, that God is pleased to do this. Now, I often get this is where a lot of Christian double talk comes in, because to me now it's just double talk. I used to wrestle with it, how this could be so, how God could be both sorrowful about killing his son and also pleased about it, as Isaiah 53 talks about, but I don't have to worry about that anymore. One, I think it's a misinterpretation of Isaiah 53 to say that this is about Jesus. I think it's more about the nation of Israel as a whole is what Isaiah is talking about. Now, a lot of people argue, yeah, well, it can have that application and another application. Okay, fine. Well, I'll let that go then. But then we're still left with a problem. God is pleased to do it. He's pleased to kill his own kid. From my perspective, it's a pretty barbaric notion. Okay, it's an ancient morality that needs to die. Okay, I think we've evolved past this in some respects. Self-sacrifice is one thing, and some would argue that Jesus willfully went to the cross based on his Garden of Gethsemane prayer. But at the same time, he's not given any other options. He's not, God, this infinite, intelligent, all-powerful being, can't seem to come up with a better plan than to do this. And then as he does the plan, he's pleased to do it. A lot of people feel that in Matthew 27:46 is when this is fulfilled. When Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That this is the moment that God pours all the sin of humanity onto Jesus, and thus, in sorrow he looks away. But if Isaiah 53 is fulfilled, it's not in sorrow that he's punishing and killing his son, it's in pleasure. And this creates the real introduction, in my opinion, of sadistic notions of God. And we've seen this throughout the Old Testament, that God seems to be a little bit sadistic about things, putting people through suffering and death. It's not like the world isn't already bad enough as it is. God's got to add to it. We've seen God drown the entire world. The population of the world, except for 8 people. We've seen in the story God, committing genocides and ordering genocides. And, at least there are times when he gets his own hands dirty, killing, Job's 10 kids to prove a point to the devil. We've seen God have this callous, very backward, barbaric notion of the value of human life. And I think as we've evolved as human beings, we begin to realize that every individual becomes more and more valuable, that their life is more and more valuable because it contributes to the whole. If we let people live in freedom and let them live out their lives, that has more benefit than any sacrifice they could make down the road. We all do see people willfully sacrifice themselves to save others, but that's not necessarily altruistic either. And we end up with a God here who is pleased to kill his son, not sorrowful about it, not with great regret, not with, it's like the villain in the story that suddenly turns to their child that has been totally devoted to them and says, yeah, guess what, you're up. Okay, and grabs him by the neck, throws him on the altar, and stabs him with a knife in order to, in order to appease all this idea, to call up this master plan. I'm sorry to say it, but I think God, to me, is starting to feel more like Thanos, a guy who has this plan, and maybe in the end the intentions are good, but it's causing a lot of evil along the way. And I think that's a morality that human beings are starting to evolve past, that we can find ways to solve the problem without necessarily getting rid of other people to do so, of sacrificing other people to do so, of having this morality where we look past these ideas. Now, we have a lot of books and stories and games and things that deal with these issues, okay? It's the greater good versus the rights of the individual. And to me, the rights of the individual need to prevail because that is the greater good. And the problem with the notion of God sacrificing his son and being pleased about it is it's a barbaric old notion that somehow bringing about the greater good requires sacrifices that are near and dear to our hearts. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. We can plan better and think better and have a better understanding of the world. But this notion of the crucifixion creates and implants in people still the old idea that it's sometimes okay to destroy something you love in order to get something better, and that's the only option, that's the only plan. Because we've said it before that the crucifixion doesn't seem to be all that great of a plan, because this is a very barbaric way to die. I mean, I could throw in the theme of, did Jesus really sacrifice something when he knows that he's going to be raised from the dead 3 days later? He has to go through minor discomfort to get there. But the attitude about it, that God is just, callous and flippant about it, he's pleased about it. And some of you theists are you Christian theists are going to go, well, he was very sorrowful. Then why the Isaiah 53:10, and why do you apply it here? Okay, if why is God forsaking his own child, and in his pouring out his wrath, his anger, and all this other stuff on his kid, when his child isn't the one that's the perpetrator? Really, when you look at it, it's God who is the ultimate perpetrator, because he created the world the way he did, and it's not the best way that he could do it. So, in the end, the crucifixion as a biblical theme, this idea of sacrifice, kind of is troubling to me. I know this is a little bit different style of Bible study, but I'm more thinking about the philosophy behind the theology of the crucifixion. And to me, the philosophy behind it is an old one, an old idea of atonement through blood, and atonement through the sacrifice of something that's the first and the best. And somehow that's going to make everything else better. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And I don't think it's necessary at all. And I think that God could have come up with a much better plan that doesn't involve the idea of killing your own family. See, because that's the thing, the attitude that people get, this, if God does it, why is it wrong for me to do it? Okay, or if this is a good idea to God, then why shouldn't it be a good idea to me? And it's implanted in that seed in the back of every person's mind that believes this stuff, that if God required of them to sacrifice their children, I mean, after all, Abraham, then they should do it. This idea is still implanted going all the way back to Abraham. Abraham is considered a type of God in Christ, where he plays the role of God and his child plays the role of Christ. And, we're going to sacrifice your only son because. And that is the most troubling thing about the crucifixion of Jesus. And if you want to read about the crucifixion of Jesus, you have several accounts. If you want to delve into the theology of Isaiah 53, there's no shortage of Christian theologies that write about this. But now, as somebody who looks back at the story and looks at it, to me, God's kind of the villain. He's the Thanos. He's the villain that grabs their child that's been loyal to them and standing next to them the whole time and said, "You've been very I'm going to thank you for your sacrifice." And we consider such people villains until we get to God doing it with Jesus. And somehow, this story causes us to go backwards in our thinking about humanity and the value of our children and the value of family, that somehow we got to get rid of that. And it's a very, political idea, because the one thing an absolute monarch can't have is somebody valuing the love for something else above obedience to them. Okay, because that causes sedition. And so the crucifixion theme kind of undercuts the idea of even love towards your family. Even Jesus said it, you have to hate your own family to follow him. This idea of demolishing family and demolishing, I find it laughable now when I look at the world and I hear, the Christian right talk about how they value family, and, there's a diminishing of family values and things like that. And I think to myself, yes, the family value of it's okay to kill your kid in order to save the world, that's a real good family value, from an imaginary problem and give it an imaginary solution. This mentality, who's the real one that's sacrificing children here? I mean, I seem to remember in the Bible there's several accounts of almost and actual sacrifice of children. We got Jephthah sacrificing his daughter. We have Abraham almost sacrificing his son. And then we have Jesus actually being the sacrifice of God. God killing his own child, killing his own kid in order to fulfill his plan, because he can't come up with a better one. And that's the mental attitude that this whole idea of the crucifixion gives us. And not only that, you can kill your own kid, but do it in such the most brutal way possible and be pleased about it. At some level, be pleased about it. It's the Thanos pleasure of snapping his fingers and having half the population disappear and your plan is fulfilled, but at the cost of half of humanity. Where in this case, God sacrifices himself to appease his own rules. He kills his own child in order to fulfill his plan and is pleased with the fulfillment of the plan, even though it costs so much. I don't know if I like that idea at all anymore. I don't like the fact that people think that's okay. I don't like the fact that people will hold on to that and think that that's a good idea. And so I don't know if this is so much of a Bible study, but a look at the crucifixion and the themes of it, and realizing how dangerous and deadly those themes are to society. There's no family values here, okay? Yeah, and so it's laughable to me when people talk about that now. I don't know. I guess I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts and comments on the various passages in the crucifixion, the themes of Christian crucifixion, so on and so forth. But to me, it's like keeping a very barbaric notion alive when there are better alternatives. And I think that's what's really wrong with one of the ways that religion poisons everything, the way it twists and corrupts good things. That somehow love gets, corrupted into some sadistic, masochistic, view of love inside the family, to the point where a father will kill their child and think it's a good thing, okay, no matter what the reason might be, and somehow be pleased with it, pleased that he was crushed. I don't know. I guess I'm more interested in what everybody has to say. This is a discussion starter, so as always with Bible studies. But for those of us deconverting, this is one of those notions you can discard. This isn't a good idea. And once you see past the veil of how barbaric this is, you'll never unsee it. It's why I've been told recently that people said, "Oh, you're going to come back to Christianity soon." I'm like, "Oh, hell no. Not with ideas like this one." Christianity has some horrible ideas, and this is the biggest one. One of the biggest ones, at least, for sure. There may be more. Yeah, probably more. And this demystifies the Bible. When you start looking at what God is really saying here with his actions and attitude, I think it becomes clearer that I'm so glad I deconverted. A little late, but better late than never. And changing my mind and mentality about this, and realizing that this is horrible storytelling. And it really puts God more in a villain role than a hero. And Jesus isn't a hero either. He's just a patsy that gets caught up in his father's scheme. And to me, that's a more proper interpretation of the crucifixion of Jesus. So, as taken from literature. So, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts and comments on this. But for those of you deconverting, just understand that this is a good thing you're deconverting from. Getting rid of these attitudes, these ideas, yeah, it's a good thing. So comment away. I'd love to hear it. I'd like to thank everybody for every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are awesome. Thanks very much. The channel continues to grow, a little bit slower than it was before, but it still continues to grow, so thank you very much. And, I want to also give a shout out to my members. Thank you guys. All these people that you see on your screen, they're what makes some of these videos, like these Bible studies and the stuff that I do on Wednesday when I talk more about deconversion. They're the ones that make it possible and make it worthwhile. So thank you very, very much to my citizens and rabid citizens. Thank you. And as always, live your best life. Don't waste your time with theological themes like this and the trappings of religion and faith that go along with it, but rather give all your time, your money, your opportunities to building up yourself, building up the relationships with those you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. Trust me, I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.